you a videotape of the collapse itself.
Describe that.
Now we go to videotape the collapse of this building.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
This is Dan Dix here reporting for Press for Truth, and it is hard to believe that it has been 18 years since the attack that occurred on September 11th, 2001. A lot of time has passed, but to this date, there is still groundbreaking information coming out about what actually transpired on that day, such as this latest study from Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Fire did not cause third tower's collapse on 9/11, new study finds. On September 11th, 2001 at 5:20 p.m., the 47-story World Trade Center Building 7 collapsed into its own footprint, falling more than 100 feet at the rate of gravity for 2.5 seconds of its 7-second destruction. Despite calls for the evidence to be preserved, New York City officials had the building's debris removed and destroyed in the ensuing weeks and months, preventing a proper forensic investigation from ever taking place. 7 years later, federal investigators concluded that WTC 7 was the first steel-framed high-rise ever to have collapsed solely as a result of normal office fires. Today, we at Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth are pleased to partner with the University of Alaska Fairbanks in releasing the draft report of a 4-year computer modeling study of WTC 7's collapse conducted by researchers in the university's Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. The UAF WTC 7 report concludes that the collapse of WTC 7 on 9/11 was caused not by fire, but rather by the near-simultaneous failure of every column in the building. And joining me on the line today to help me understand the implications of this groundbreaking study is San Francisco Bay Area architect Richard Gage, AIA, member of the American Institute for Architects and founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. So Richard, thank you so much for joining us here today. As I said in the beginning, it's hard to believe it's been 18 years. I mean, I remember where I was that day. I'm sure you do too. And I gotta say, I'm really excited about the fact that there's still to this day groundbreaking reports coming out, like this draft report that you've released from Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. So maybe we could start with, how did this come about? I mean, this is the result of a 4-year study. It's currently just a draft. There's more to come of this. So how did this start, and what are the current findings at this point today?
Yes, this is one of the top forensic structural engineers in the country, Dan, and he's the chairperson of the Civil Engineering Department at the University of Alaska. And so one of our supporters approached him 4 years ago and said, you've got to look at this building. He said, no. Fires brought that building down, you know. And he was just approached and said, given some information, and finally got curious and actually looked at the evidence. You know, that's the hard part. These engineers and architects think they know so much, and they don't actually look at the evidence. So they still continue to believe the official story, because none of our associations, I'm a member of the American Institute of Architects, 80,000 members. We haven't received one bulletin from this premier architectural association about World Trade Center 7, the third worst structural failure in modern history. So when we do get people to look at it, like Professor Halsey finally did, he says, okay, you might have something here. I'm intrigued. So we contracted with them and been working with them steadily. And he's now with this draft study, which has a conclusion, right? It says definitively, fire did not bring this building down. I mean, they took NIST's assumptions. NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, who was tasked by Congress to explain all three collapses to the American people. By the way, most people don't even know. Your audience is exceptional, but some may not know. We're talking about Building 7, the 47-story skyscraper that collapsed on 9/11 into its own footprint in under 7 seconds. It goes down symmetrically at free fall acceleration, as fast as a bowling ball falling out of the sky, as if there wasn't 40,000 tons of structural steel in this building that was 5 times stronger than it needed to be by the safety factor to keep it from going anywhere. But all of a sudden, due to normal office fires, according to the official story, normal office fires have never brought down a skyscraper, right? So this is why Professor Halsey is so intrigued with this. He says, wait, fires brought this down, but they've never done this. This is important. All right, we have hundreds of buildings similarly built around the world. And if this could have happened, so this was their raison d'etre. Why they got into this. So they first look at NIST's assumptions. They find that at least a dozen of them are invalid. Key assumptions like, for instance, that structurally they removed the shear studs from the top of this girder on this floor 12, which was connected to this column number 79. They just removed the shear studs from their lists of structural elements because then the girder could slide sideways, being pushed by the thermal expansion of these long span beams in this, presuming that they weren't even fireproofed, by the way, which this building had fireproofing. And the girder is pushed off of its seat on this column 79, and floor 13 falls on 12, and 12 on 11, and so on for 9 floors, leaving column 79 unbraced. So finally it buckles and the whole inside of the building begins to cascade in just 10 seconds. In their computer model, they show 400 structural steel connections failing every second. Now, had that happened in reality, we would have had massive deformation on the exterior perimeter structural steel system, which the Halsey report notes all of this. And then breaking of windows, thousands of them, and granite panels. None of that do we see. We just see the building going smoothly, suddenly, symmetrically, straight down. So he finds these false assumptions. We've named a bunch of them already. But then he says, well, hey, what if we do model the building with these false assumptions? Will it go down? The building doesn't go down. There's not even a local failure that can precipitate out from that local failure into a progressive collapse, which is NIST's whole initiation of collapse theory and the collapse for this building. So they gosh, we can't bring this building down. So it definitely didn't come down by fire. They couldn't get the building to come down. Well, what do we have to do to bring this building down? So they take out like 8 or 9 columns around 79. And the building, and that overloads the exterior columns. And guess what happens when that happens? The building begins to tip over, as you'd expect in an asymmetrically supported building, without its main supports. In the northeast section of the building, it's going to fall to the northeast, right? Well, okay, but that's not what the video shows us. The video shows us a straight down collapse. What do we have to do to get this building to fall straight down? Well, you take out more and more columns, it's still tipping over. He had to take out 650 columns within a second or so of each other to get this building to collapse straight down, uniformly, symmetrically, in the exact manner that we saw in the videos, proving that the entire NIST computer modeling effort and their report on this building, which came out 7 years later, after everybody forgot about it, to prove that it's a complete fraud. Mm-hmm. And so we know how that, but how do you take out 650 columns, Dan?
Yeah, well, that is the question, because, I mean, it seems that there's a great deal of cognitive dissonance going on in the minds of the people who see the footage, see what's going on with their very own eyes, but still believe the lie, let's call it for what it is, that fires could have possibly brought down a 47-story steel column structure. It's ridiculous that this is what people are thinking when their own eyes are telling them something very, very different. What does this imply? I mean, if it obviously wasn't fires, it seems to me the only other possibility is controlled demolition, and it seems to me that would imply foreknowledge.
Oh yeah, absolutely. First of all, regarding controlled demolition, it looks exactly like the old hotels in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, you're showing that for us. This is an amazing building. If not, Google collapse of Building 7. You can't even distinguish it from a controlled demolition. Most of them in Las Vegas. But on top of that, we have the scientific forensic evidence of controlled demolition in this building by who? FEMA, who did the first report in 2002. Appendix C in that report documents hot sulfur corrosion attack on the steel. The author, Jonathan Barnett, fire protection engineer, says the ends of the steel beams were partly evaporated in extraordinarily high temperatures. Wait a minute. He's talking about temperatures capable of melting steel. What are those? 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, how hot were these fires? 600 degrees, maybe. These fires are few, small, and scattered. Fires have never brought down a skyscraper before 9/11, ever. This is an unprecedented event. Controlled demolition should have been the first hypothesis, but it was relegated to the years later when, in a series of frequently asked questions that they finally answered, very frequently asked, up until answered and still frequently asked. So we have an extraordinary set of scientific forensic evidence, which includes not just the silver dollar size holes in the steel from World Trade Center 7, the hot sulfur corrosion attack. Where does the sulfur come from? Well, sulfur is added to thermite to become thermate, much more effective at cutting through steel. And the pools of molten iron that are found out there in the site by the first responders, the structural engineers, Leslie Robertson, citing a river of molten steel. The firefighters saying it's flowing down the channel rails like lava. Where does this come from? Well, studies of it find that it's iron, not steel. Interesting. We haven't built skyscrapers out of iron for 100 years or so. So where does molten iron come from? Well, molten iron is the byproduct of thermite. Thermite, again, an incendiary used by the military to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter. So we have the forensic evidence of thermite in the molten steel and the molten iron microspheres that are found by the U.S. Geological Survey throughout all the World Trade Center dust. This material is the residue of a thermite incendiary, but they don't say that. They just document it very well, the USGS. The EPA says this is a signature component of the World Trade Center dust. It's not even World Trade Center dust unless it has all these molten iron microspheres, which previously molten, which we don't even know where they came from. Well, they are issued under explosive conditions with thermite incendiary chemical reaction, issues molten iron. The surface tension forms itself into a sphere. So this is direct evidence of thermite incendiaries, and it supports the Halsey study one for one. It's a beautiful combination because the Alaska study will get the attention of the engineers and the architects who are just prone to think in these terms and can't stop themselves from looking at an interesting computer modeling study of a building they don't know much about. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't have all the baggage like we do with the Twin Towers. People are willing to look at Building 7 out of curiosity, at least these engineers looking at the study. Others, like me, I was fascinated by the forensic evidence.
Well, what's the hope with the Alaska study moving forward? Is this going to be moving into a sort of an open source investigation where people can compile onto the evidence, or is it kind of done with at this point, or is it going to continue from here?
Well, the draft in the title indicates that there's a period of open comments, an open period for comments, open from anybody. We've invited the engineering community, and we've sent postcards to 20,000 engineers inviting them to look at this and comment on it. Hopefully we don't get 20,000 comments. But it's open architecture. We're not hiding the results of this study like NIST did when we presented a FOIA request to give us the input results so us architects and engineers can validate your study, NIST. They wrote back, said, sorry, that might jeopardize public safety if we were to release this information. Wait a minute. Doesn't it jeopardize public safety to withhold this information from the architects and engineers who are tasked with ensuring the public safety? It's a complete black box. You can't get in. So this is not transparency. It's not peer-reviewed. It is a hoax upon the American people. And most architects and engineers just didn't know about it. So they weren't screaming for this information. The American Society of Civil Engineers is also a black box. They put their top people in key positions early on as volunteers to support the fire theory, and they worked themselves into the FEMA report in 2002, and then many of those worked themselves into the NIST report, which completely threw out that Appendix C, the metallurgical examination that we talked about earlier, when they produced a report that has no witnesses of explosions, even though there were hundreds in the Twin Towers and many in Building 7 as well, before the tower collapses, the Twin Towers and Building 7.
Well, thank God that you guys are there along with the university in order to counter all of this, I call it what it is, insanity coming from NIST and the flat out lies about what actually took place on that day. You guys are actually countering this narrative with facts, scientific data, and proof conclusively, as the report concludes, that fires could not have possibly brought down WTC 7. So again, this is groundbreaking stuff. If people want to download the report, where do they go to do this? And if they want to even contribute by commenting, how do they do that?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not available. It might jeopardize public safety if we were to release this report.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure. I bet it will.
I'm just kidding.
You know.
You go to the website, ae911truth.org. It's right there on the top, the story, and you can, down in the story, you can download the report, print it out, get it to every architect and engineer you can find. We're taking it to Congress on the 11th, after our National Press Club press conference at the National Press Club, 10 o'clock in the morning, September 11th. It'll be live streamed. That stream is also available. I mean, you can find out, you can go to our website and listen to that report, where we'll have Christopher Gioia and Joseph Terragrossa, 2 of the 5 fire commissioners who unanimously voted for a new investigation based on the evidence we're talking about here, the Halsey report, and the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, who submitted to the U.S. Attorney a demand for a special grand jury investigation of this evidence. And they got it. The U.S. Attorney wrote back and promised that this will happen. And now they filed a mandamus action to ensure that it does happen. That just happened a couple of days ago. So we're all on fire, and the fire commissioners are going to be leading off that press conference, talking about why they're demanding a new investigation, and justice for the fallen heroes is the name of the campaign. And we're taking that to Congress in the afternoon of 9/11. We have meetings with half a dozen congressmen and a couple of dozen staffers of congressmen. And we're giving our petition and the Bobby McIlvaine Act for a new investigation, draft legislation. It's all going to all 535 congresspersons, because we have a team of folks fanning out in the halls of Congress there.
Well, that's just fantastic. There's some truly awesome momentum happening right now when it comes to 9/11 and all the information coming out. So I really encourage people to follow what's been coming out from architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. As you know, we've been covering this for a long time with Richard. I interviewed him for my DVD, The Toronto Hearings on 9/11, which We will be releasing for the first time as well, in full, the over 5-hour-long DVD on YouTube will be up tomorrow, so stay tuned for that, because we need to maintain this momentum. We have to continue to get this information out there to all ends of the globe, so that we can eventually get true justice for what actually transpired on that day, which, as we are learning, continuing to see, it's been a complete lie from the government. But thank God for guys like Richard Gage and architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, who are really peeling back the onion and getting to the core of what happened. So I strongly encourage people to check the links in the description below so they can continue to keep up to date with what's going on with you, Richard. So once again, man, keep up the fantastic work that you're doing with this great momentum in the 9/11 Truth community. And yeah, we look forward to more from you guys at 9/11 Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth.
Thanks so much, Dan. Great talking with you again.
We all want truth. The truth will set you free.